Good morning, everybody. My name is Cameron Hodgins. I am a consultant with Manatee Community Foundation, and I'm really happy that you are here today to hear from our wonderful speaker for today's Manatee Connects, Leeann Rodriguez. She has a company called She Gets Grants, and I know that this topic is really relevant for all of us in the nonprofit field. She's going to give an overview today of best practices and um, almost a checklist. Well, it is a checklist of what you should have together before you apply for grants. Make sure you're organized when that grant application comes across your desk. A couple housekeeping things. If you have questions, please pop them into the chat. And I'm going to mediate and moderate the chat with Leeann. And Leeann has asked me to just interrupt her and get your question answered right away so that the knowledge flows easily for you. So please don't be afraid, don't hesitate to ask a question. If we were in person, we would be stopping the conversation or the presentation normally to have more of a conversation. So we're going to try to do our Zoom platform that way as well. Okay. I usually say where the restrooms are, but I don't need to do that on this call. So let me admit somebody else. Okay. Oh, did they come in? Yes, great. All right, so without any further ado, I'm going to let Leeann introduce herself and jump right in here.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much, Cameron, for that warm introduction. I'm Leeann Rodriguez, and I'm so happy to be here with you today. And thank you, Manatee Community Foundation, for having me and allowing me to share my knowledge and my skill set with everyone today. So I've been in the Sarasota Manatee region for almost 11, 12 years. Oof, 2015 is the year. So whatever year we're in today, that's how long I've been in this area. My background consists of development, grant writing, fundraising, project management across different sectors. So higher ed institutions, government institutions, and non-for-profits. And I did have some experience in the for-profit sector. All this to say that across the different sectors, grants is something that I worked in heavily. And here specifically in Sarasota and Manatee County, I came to Florida to work at New College of Florida back in 2015 through 2019. And I was on what they call the college side. That side is the one that gets the grants for faculty, students, and institutional areas also. And then from there, I moved to a non-for-profit dedicated to environmental, it was a land trust dedicated to protecting the environment, full-blown 501c3 public charity. And I was there for 5 years, and we secured many grants through individual donors, major donors, and all of the local foundations, including Manatee Community Foundation, that you might be aware of. So, and for the past year and a half, I've been on my own, and I've been working specifically with different nonprofits of all sizes, helping them get ready for grant writing for fundraising. And today I'm here to share what I've learned in this year and a half, that many of the nonprofits that I've been working with struggle to have in place in order to be successful. They have the great mission, they have the narratives, they have all the work. Sometimes it's just about documents that they don't have in place. And when we're ready to hit that submit button, it doesn't go through because they don't have their documents in place. So thank you again for having me. And without further ado, let me start. So today's agenda, we'll be talking about the foundation of what you should have in place, what your repository, what essential items you should have in that repository that you can get to in a split of a second, always have on hand, because they're, you could say pro forma, or there are things that you're going to have in place for your registrations, for your profiles, and for many of the funders that request them. We'll also be talking about what the revenue strategy should look like and how grants portfolio, your grant schedule fits into that revenue strategy. I hope that you're not in organizations where leadership or peers or colleagues or funders are expecting grants alone to cover the revenue needs of the organization. We all know that's not the best practice, so we'll talk a little bit about that, what that strategy should look like when it comes to grants. And then we'll be talking about also what framework you should have in place and what tools you can use to make sure that you're competitive, that you're ready to go, and that you're ready to submit those grants to help fund your programs and your general support, your general operations. So, any questions so far or any comments, Cameron? Nope. All right, we're good to go then. So, slides are few, but the content will be on it for a while. So these are the basic documents that all funders will be asking for, that your profiles, such as the giving partner profile, Candid, what used to be called GuideStar is now just Candid. A lot of the different profiles that you might be creating for yourself, for your organization, such as Charity Navigator, or guide, dog watch, I think it's what it's called, and the other ones, the BB, the triple B ones. So you should always have, be it in a folder that you have access to or in the cloud, wherever it's at, always have these documents in place. So number one, your IRS 501c3 determination letter. That is very, very important to always have on file. And something that I've come up with now that I've been helping a lot of smaller nonprofits who are just starting out, or even if they've been around, they hadn't claimed they haven't completed their full Candid profile. Now, Candid is actually asking for your tax exempt organization affirmation letter. So that's separate from your IRS determination letter. And what that letter is just affirming to Candid and to whoever asks it from you that your public charity 501c3 status has not been revoked. So now they're not only asking for your IRS letter, they're asking for the other one saying it hasn't been revoked.
And
And
Leeann, that comes from the IRS too. That
yes,
second one. Yeah. Okay.
yes, that document, you can access it, you can request it. It's through the IRS, and it should be a clean process. So I've done it for some of my clients, and the letter arrives and then you upload it. But Candid now, if you don't upload, if they request that and you don't upload it, you won't get that platinum status if you filled out everything else, because they are requiring that. So just something to know and something to keep on file. Definitely your Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, the FDACS compliance letter. As you all know, in the state of Florida and all other states, you are required to register to officially and legally be able to fundraise. So your organization has to have that compliance letter on an annual basis. If it's not you that's completing that for your organization, make sure you are in communication with whoever is tasked with that. And it's an annual thing, and it's something that's going to be included always in your giving partner profile, and many funders ask for it outside of the giving partner profile in your portal grant applications, or if it's an email or physical hard copy applications. And yes, there's still some funders who want hard copy. They will request a copy of that compliance letter. And please know that it's the letter. You know, if you go into Check a Charity for Florida, you can find that it says active and you can print that. That's not what funders or the giving partner profile is looking for. They want the actual letter that's addressed to your organization saying that you're in compliance. So just having the Check a Charity screenshot that shows up publicly isn't enough. You have to have the letter. Many funders are now also asking for a signed W-9 form. And it has to be the most recent version. So the most recent version is the 2024. You can access that online also. Make sure whoever is authorized in your organization to sign it has signed it, and you always have it on file. That one doesn't, I can't recall right now if that expires on an annual basis, but I think it doesn't, but you have to make sure you have that. Many funders are now asking for that. And some, I didn't put it here because it's not a lot of funders, but even some funders, and these are more like the business ones, like if you're going to request a small sponsorship or gift cards or in-kind contribution from some of the local businesses or even the corporate businesses. Some of them are asking for your tax exempt letter. So that's the one that you require from the state of Florida. And that's the letter that says you don't pay taxes. And that's what you use whenever you set up, let's say, an account at Staples or any one of these places where your organization does business with to purchase equipment and supplies. So my apologies for not including that there. It's not a lot of funders who ask for it, but some do. So that's another thing you should also have on file. Very importantly, your board list. Please make sure you have an updated board list ready to submit at any given moment. In your giving partner profile, you're going to have your board members listed out, and it's going to say if they're an officer, what their role is. And it's probably going to say if it's voting or not voting and all of that. Many funders, more and more, are now asking for more information about your board. So if you have a comprehensive board list that says their name, their role, if they're an officer or not. And if you include your executive director or your chief executive officer as a non-voting board member, make sure they're listed there also. In addition, many are asking for what county or city they live in. So make sure you have a column that has that information. And many are asking now for their business affiliation. So if they are still in the workforce, you would list the company that they work at, and if they're self-employed, whatever the name of their company is. And then many funders are asking for their professional title. So as an example, if let's just say Cameron was on a board and Cameron is the chair, it would say Cameron's name, board chair, the name of her company. Forgive me, Cameron, I can't recall the name of your company right now.
It's
And
impact in action.
thank you. Impact in action. She would be the founder or the president, whatever her role is. And then if she lives in Sarasota County, Sarasota County, or if she lives in Manatee County, Manatee County. And one additional item, some funders ask for the term, how long they'll be on the board for. So it sounds like a lot of work at the beginning, but if you get it done once a year, you make sure that board list is updated because different funders ask for different pieces of information. If you have it all set up, you just submit it and you're ready to go. Um, any questions so far, Cameron?
No questions. Just one was about sharing the presentation materials and recording afterwards, and it will be available to those who attend
Oh,
today.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it will be.
I just want to say on the what you just said about keeping your board members' information, it's really easily done in a spreadsheet. And I always renewed mine at my annual meeting and made sure that, everything was right for everybody there. And the
Mhm.
term limits, why do they care about term limits? Organizations want to see that you're revolving your board members, that you're not stale, that you're not just, a bunch of yes people or just a bunch of unengaged folks. So that turnover is important.
Yeah. And what's really important about that, if I may, Cameron, to add to that, um, there were some recent surveys that show that nonprofits in the state of Florida, actually, over 70% do include board limits in term limits in for their board members. Out of those, I think it was 40 something percent. Um, have a parameter that board members can only serve 2 executive terms. And for the most part, many of the organizations cap that to 3-year terms each. So overall, 6 years for a particular board member. Doesn't mean your organization has to do that, but just so you know, it is common practice. And it's because of the reasons that Cameron mentioned, but also they want to make sure that your board has representation of the audience that you're serving, the clients that you serve. And if you have the same people for 15 years, 20 years, it stays stale, that you have fresh perspectives, people with lived experience, people with different professional experience also. So that's really important of why they're asking for that term limit, the board term. Um, Very important also, I've come across a lot of funders as of late who are asking not only for that board list, but for the bios of your board members. So I've had to, like, some of my clients didn't have them in place. So I've ran around, went to their website, did some LinkedIn stalking, found information, sent it off to the clients and said, please let me know if this is accurate. Please approve it. They are asking for your bios, and without this, we cannot move forward with your $100,000 grant request or your $50,000 grant request. So again, really important as you put together your board list template, in a spreadsheet, the way Cameron just described it, make sure that you have bios that are approved, that are accurate, and that can represent, that you are approved to share publicly, because these are things that your funders are asking for, and you have to be able to send them off. And also with your key staff. So your executive leader, if that's executive director or CEO, whatever the title is of the person who leads the organization, that person should definitely have an approved bio that you can share. You have to have that on file. And then specifically, and we'll look at this now when we get to the cases for support, for each one of your lead staff people who manage certain things within your organization, because depending on the grant that you're submitting, be it a general operating grant or be it a specific program, many funders want to know who is overseeing this, who is leading this particular initiative. So those key people in your organization, you should have readily available bios on them also. It doesn't have to be 2 or 3 pages, none of that. Just a couple of sentences, a paragraph that talks about their expertise, that talks about their, years of experience, their role, and how their expertise and role are going to ensure that that particular grant is going to be well managed, and that the goals will be met. So, any questions so far, Cameron? I know you'll interrupt me, just don't want to sound like a monologue
No,
here.
you're good. Does anybody have any questions that you want to jump in?
No?
Okay.
Okay. Cases for support. Ta, 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 ta. This is the foundational piece for grant writing, for your marketing efforts, for your giving partner profile, for your candidate profile, for everything that your organization communicates when it comes to educating the community on what your organization does, but most importantly, when you're talking to funders of all levels, be it an individual donor, even if it's a monthly donor, if it's a major donor, if it's a institutional funder, if it's a local community foundation, if it's a private foundation, all of your wording in a case for support should be tied to everything that you do. It should include your mission, your vision, who you serve, what the need is, what your unique solution is. Why is it unique? Who else does similar things? And if they do similar things, how what you do is different, or how you partner with others that do similar things. The impact you're having on the people that you're serving, your sustainability to maintain your organization and the programs that you have, and how much you're looking to fundraise to sustain your organization and each one of your programs. So that case for support It should be multi-level. It should be overall for your full organization. But then if you have several different programs, each one of those programs should have a case for support. And when I say a case for support, a full description of everything that I just mentioned for each one of the programs. And each one of those programs, everyone should have an approved budget at the beginning of their new fiscal year. You should be able to have a specific budget for each one of your programs that you can then pull on. It's approved by your organization, and whenever you're writing a grant for a particular program, you have the budget readily available. I've been in situations where we've been reinventing the wheel over and over and over because the organization has not split out the budgets for their specific programs. There's this high level budget for all programs, but they haven't split it out. And so it can become very challenging when you're trying to fund one specific program. You're trying to figure out, so how much do we expend on this? And, how do we prorate staff people? So all of that should be done well in advance. And if you're at the table talking about these decisions that are being made about budget, please be very mindful about that, of what you're going to need to be successful when you're talking to funders and writing grants. So that's highly, highly important. And it doesn't have to be a glossy case for support. It could be an internal document that you use time and time again throughout the year, and you update as needed. As impact increases, you can update whatever your statistics are. And please, 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 when we're talking about impact, now that I say that, please remember that outputs, activities alone are not considered impact. Impact is what we did, the activities that we do, the things that we give out. If it's tangible, if you have a food pantry and you give out meals, yes, it's great to say we gave out 20,000 meals last year. Great. What's the impact? Okay, if we gave out 20,000 meals, does that mean 20,000 families were served, or was it a household of so many individuals that were served through the meals and they were able to, not worry about groceries for a month, and because of that, they were able to focus on other things. So that's the difference between saying 20,000 meals were delivered versus the impact it had on a particular household or on how many families or households you were able to serve. So that's really, really important. Talked about cases for support, talked about budgets. So please make sure that at the beginning of your fiscal year, as well ahead, you have approved budgets, both the overall budget, that you can understand your budget. If you're not the person who's making the decisions or who's at the table, make sure that whoever is approving these budgets, in an ideal world, budgets are being made from input from the whole organization of what is needed, tied to the goals of the organization, the strategic direction. We don't all live in ideal worlds. So if you're in a non-ideal world, make sure that the budget is shared with you, that you can understand it, that you can ask questions, and that it's approved. You have approved versions to use for all of your grant writing and funding requests, because they will be asked for time and time again. And they will ask for your overall approved budget, and they will ask for a specific program budget. And that's where that comes in very handy, to have that at the beginning of your fiscal year. Fundraising plans or goals, that's another great one to have in place, because that's how you tie back. Many funders will ask, how is what you're proposing to us? Number one, how does that make an impact in the community? We just talked about impact. Number two, how does that fulfill or advance your mission as an organization? And number three, how does that align with our priorities, funder? So if you have, I'm sorry, I'm talking about strategic plan right now. Sorry, I jumped over fundraising plan. So I'm talking about strategic plan right now. So if your organization doesn't have a strategic plan, it's highly recommended that they have one, or at least a document that talks about the goals for the year that you can pull on to be able to tie in those questions. And number one, make sure that the things that you're requesting in your grants actually align with the strategic direction of the organization. So that's really important. If there isn't a strategic plan in place, please ask in writing, where can we find, or, as an organization, where are we headed this year? And that's how then your fundraising plan, now I'm going back up, so my apology for switching. That's how you align your fundraising plan and your fundraising goals. And so your fundraising plan should really be tied, number one, to the strategic goals or direction. Number two, to the budget that the organization has approved. As a nonprofit, we should be looking to fund all of those programs which are restricted, but also if there's a capital campaign, you need to know, what type of grants you might be going after. So if you're not the person who is developing the fundraising plan for the organization, please be asked, please ask to be included in those conversations. And if there is a fundraising plan, that's really important for you to have access to and for you to see so that you know where to insert your grant schedule. You know how to identify what different opportunities for what different buckets of money. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the revenue strategy, but that's really important. Lived experience, full disclosure. I mean, no one has to know what organization. I've worked at over 13 different organizations out of state and in state, so it doesn't even matter. But I've been in organizations where it doesn't matter the size. It matters, what matters is leadership. And when those things aren't clear, it makes it that much more challenging. Or when the goals are moving targets, it makes it that more challenging to be able to focus on a grant schedule and go after the right opportunities versus having worked in an organization that has been very mindful, thoughtful, and clear about what the goals are for the year. And that was such a blessing to have worked in. I'm thinking of one particular organization that I worked at because everybody knew. And when I say everybody, we all knew our mission statement by heart. We knew the vision. We knew there were three goals each year. Each year we would learn what the three goals were. Our budgets were all tied to those three goals. Everybody went and did their plan. We went forward with those goals. And if there were any changes, it was communicated immediately so that anyone who needed to shift their goals or their strategies could do so. So again, we don't all live in ideal worlds, but as much information as you can have regarding the strategic direction of the organization and how your role ties into that, the better off you'll be in order to write those grants in a way that makes sense and truly addresses the needs. Very importantly, financials. For the organizations that are required to have an audited financial statement, those are the ones who have had revenue of 750,000 or more. Please make sure that you have access to those. Number one, your giving partner profile is going to require it. You should have that uploaded. Number two, many funders ask for the most recent audited statement. If you're not required to have an audited statement because it's below that threshold and you need a reviewed a reviewed financial statement, please have that on file for not just the previous fiscal year, for the one prior to that also. And then you should be in communication on a quarterly basis with whoever does your, whoever your CFO is or does the accountant at your organization so that they can give you quarterly P&Ls or statement of activities. Many funders ask not only for the financials, but for a most updated P&L. So those are three things regarding your financials that you should be keenly aware of. And like manner, your 990s. So depending on the version of your 990s, make sure you have access to that. Most funders ask for the two most recent. So just make sure you have that on file also. And very importantly, annual and impact reports. The most recent grants that I've submitted have asked for an impact report. So immediately ending a fiscal year, most organizations put forth some type of communication that includes all the accomplishments of that previous fiscal year. So what your numbers were, what your impact was, what your financials, that's where you break down the financials. I'm not saying you do this specifically, but that should be readily available. And in the best practices that that impact report is approved by leadership. So the numbers that are reported in that annual report should be accurate. So it should be tying with financials and 990s and should be tying with the impact that programs and staff have been reporting to leadership. So you should feel confident that you can use that as a tool also as you're writing your grants and you're talking about your impact, your past impact, and how that informs moving forward what you're proposing. Any questions so far, Cameron?
Nope. I think we're good.
All righty. So, essential registrations. I've been talking a lot about the giving partner profile. I'm sure all of you have your updated giving partner profile because we just had the giving challenge. And congratulations to all of you who did well on the giving challenge. We know that it's not an easy feat to update this. So that's why having all of those documents, those items in place are really going to help you with these three things that I'm going to talk about right now. So your giving partner profile is going to be built up with all of the things that we just discussed. So it shouldn't be that much of a struggle when you're updating it again if you have all of those items in place. It's when, and it does take time. So I do know that it takes time to invest in updating the giving partner profile as well as Candid, which used to be known as Guide Stars called Candid. So that's why I put the slash just in case you still call it Guide Star. So the cool thing, I was training my son yesterday. I have my son who's trying to learn all this and help me out. So what's the difference? He says, so what's the difference between the giving partner profile and the Candid? And so I'm explaining the difference to him and just know that there's a lot of similarities. So there's a lot of common information that both are asking for, but there are some sections that are very different. And as I mentioned before, now Candid asks for that that IRS affirmation letter, plus it asks for the strategic goals. It asks for it asks for some of the same information that the giving partner profile asks about your board members in a different way a little bit because it asks for all of the diversity and inclusion and all of the information that the giving partner profile asks for, but they have different ways of asking it. So that's why it's really important to truly know your board members and be able to state those different demographics about your leadership. And they both have the unknown or wish to, what is it, decline to answer. They both have that. The thing about the Candid Guide Star is that it's all about transparency. So the more information you can input in there, the higher the probability is for you to get that platinum seal of transparency, which is what we all should aspire for at a non-for-profit. That's the seal that, funders look at and that very importantly, a lot of the corporations rely on the Candid profile. So if you're looking for corporate sponsorships, corporate grants, they will definitely pull from your Candid profile. And Candid profile also, you have to make sure that your NTEECs are accurate. I had a client, and the NTEECs, it's based on the type of organization that you're registered as. I had one client that we completed successfully a request to a corporation, and immediately within a day or two, it was declined. And it was because the NTEEC unbeknownst to me, was not accurate. The organization had been founded on one mission. Years later, they changed their mission, but they never changed their NTEEC. And because the corporation just pulled from Candid, they disqualified them immediately. So just make sure, I mean, this isn't something that you have to go in and do, but if this were to happen to you, that you receive like an immediate decline, you're like, well, how can it be declined? How would have they had time to read this so quickly, like on the same day? Check just to make sure if your NTEECs are up to date. Those are all IRS classified and regulated. So just a little tidbit there. And then really, really important, you may have noticed that all of our local community foundations and the private foundations, they are all gravitating or have already adopted portals to be able to apply to their grants. And they've updated many of them, their cycles and during which season of the year you can apply for certain things. So it's really important for you to create your portal accounts, even if you've received funding from them in the past. Many of them have changed their platforms, so you need to update that. And then best practice, and this is huge. Make sure you have a place where those credentials are easily available for the person who actually submits the submit button. So that's really important. Sometimes it'll ask, not sometimes, all of the times now, I've been helping clients and they ask for verification codes. So whatever cell phone you put in there, that's the cell phone that's going to receive that verification code. In your portal account, whatever email you registered your organization's account on, that's the email that's going to receive that verification email code. So all of those things are really important. It seems like not important, but it is, especially when you're scrambling or when, a deadline is coming up and you can't find with the email or the code or whatever. Make sure you have all those portal accounts ready to go with all of your login credentials in a safe space place where you can access them and access the portal and make sure that all of your information is there ready to go once you have your grant ready to submit. So any questions there? Nope.
No questions, but I'm relating to staff changeover and the person who had all the access is no longer there.
Mm,
It's really, really hard. And make sure for all your social media accounts, same thing.
yeah. For example, have several clients that have had turnover or use consultants to do some of their grant writing, and which was great. But regarding their credentials, nobody could find them. And so now we have all these systems set up for one particular client where every time I create something, together with the package, the grant package, I have a document that says login credentials. Here's the link to the portal. Here's the username. And it's just there up front and center. So really, really important. And then it's such a hassle. I want to give another example. I was hired by one client who couldn't provide a historic database of all the grants that they had applied to, unfortunately. So I've been helping this client build that. And so we applied for a grant, and it seemed like, a shoe-in because the funder actually invited the organization to apply for the grant. And so I'm following up saying, we submitted this back, do you have any status? When can we hear word? The email back was, you never submitted your grant report. And I was like, oh, that's not good. All right. So go back to the client, this is what they replied, can you please advise? I have no access. I have no idea. So then it's getting into that conversation with the funder. So you don't want to be in that situation. Luckily, there's a good relationship. The funder understands and the funder is able to help a little bit with that. But if this is the first time that funder has given you money and you haven't built a good relationship, chances are you're probably not going to get it again. So something as easy as making sure you have your login credentials in a place where people can access it could really help with these type of headaches down the road. Righty. And essential policies. So again, these aren't for you to create. This is an organizational thing, but you should make sure that they are on file. I haven't had any funders who ask for a copy of the policy, but you do want to make sure that they exist in your organization, that somebody has told you, yes, we have the legally required ones, and those are the conflict of interest, record retention, very important here in the state of Florida, whistleblower, and non-discrimination. You have to truthfully be able to say that these policies are in place in your organization. Many funders ask for that. It's just a checkbox. Even on your giving partner profile, it asks for it. It's a checkbox that you do have them in place. And I believe in the giving partner profile, there's some spaces for you to upload the policies, if I'm not mistaken. So that's really important. Best practice policies to have: gift acceptance policy. In the development, fundraising, grant writing world, that is hugely, wildly important to have a gift acceptance policy. My son was asking me about this yesterday. He's like, why is that important? And so I gave him a whimsical explanation. And I said, well, let's say you're a child serving organization and a legal tax-paying pornography company says they want to donate $1 million to you. Your gift acceptance policy should be able to say, we do not, accept donations, gifts of any kind from organizations, from for-profit organizations or any organizations that do not align with our mission. And so he was like, oh, whoa, okay, I understand that. And so that was just a very drastic way to explain it to him, but it's really, really important. A more easy, or like I've been in situations where I have had a donor call me Friday night at 7 o'clock when I used to work at an organization. Yeah, wanted to donate my car to you. All right. We don't have that in our gift that, we don't accept those type of gifts. Well, you should. All you have to do is, register in some place and they'll pick up the car and they'll sell it and then the proceeds go to you. And so I'm like, well, we don't have it in place right now, so I couldn't accept it. But I was able to look at my gift acceptance policy and say we couldn't accept it. Long story short, turned out that person was on I-75, their car broke down and they just didn't want to have it towed. So in any case, it wasn't really a philanthropic type of gift, but in any case, you having a gift acceptance policy of what you will accept and what you won't accept um, doesn't doesn't vibe. And I think, my apologies, I used the wrong word. I said the word pornography. I should have said an adult store, one of those type of things. So I didn't mean to use that word. Um, and donor privacy policy is another one that is a really good best practice. Donors, as you know, have the right to be able to have their information confidential. If they want to be acknowledged, that's where you have a donor recognition policy. That's a best practice. And this is really important for grants. If they want to be publicly acknowledged, you have to be able to address how they want to be acknowledged and negotiate that with them. And if they want it to be anonymous, you have to be able to protect that right of them being anonymous publicly. Of course, your internal records, you're going to know who gave you the gift and what the gift is for, but that's really important for your organization to have so that you're not trying to figure out things every single time a gift or a grant comes through the door. And another best practice policy to have is confidentiality best practice. So this is for leadership, board members, volunteers, staff, everything. This is like Vegas, everything, all confidential conversations that happen at the boardroom, that happen in your organization, those should be kept confidential. especially when you're working with volunteers, which is something that all nonprofits have, volunteers. You have to make sure that they sign off a confidentiality agreement, a non-disclosure agreement, and that this is treated with confidentiality. You are dealing with donors' information, you're dealing with financials, you're dealing with information that is supposed to be protected for the organization. So these are just like best practice policies. This is just to help guide you when you're writing your grants and when you're writing funder requests, even if it's not a grant. So any questions or comments there, Cameron?
No comments from the audience, but I'm just chuckling about some gift acceptance offers that I've experienced over my career that were really, if we did not have policies in place, would have been a mess. One was a boat that had been in the water for a very long time with a lot of barnacles, and the owner of it promised that it was like, a rural Caribbean ship. And when we actually went to look at it, it was a nightmare. And so we were quickly able to say no, thank you. And then another one was a donor called and said they had minerals or something on this land, and did we want the right to the minerals? And then that becomes a conversation of who's testing the land, who's looking for the minerals, who's paying for it, and what is the procedure to say yes or no after that's done. And
Yeah,
that was a tough situation to navigate too. And it turns out it wasn't worth it. It
yeah.
wasn't worth not only the owner testing for the minerals, but what he said he had turned out not to be true too. And so the land wasn't as valuable as he thought.
Mm,
So not both situations were a no, but both donors called very enthusiastically, like, this is a lot of money for you. And no. So be careful.
yeah. There was a situation I worked at an organization where without a staff person went out, two staff people went out and accepted on behalf of the institution without having gotten approval or even had a conversation with the institution. They accepted a boat. You mentioned the boat. They accepted a boat. It was to help their marine science program. And they thought it was a deal. Well, lo and behold, they hadn't talked with anybody at the institution. They didn't take into consideration the maintenance cost, the fuel cost, and it turned out to be like the pit, the money pit for that gift that once it was even how do you say appraised, once the boat was appraised, it only had like a value of 3,000 something. And it turned out, that for that full year, the organization had to invest over $100,000 just to, so beware. Yes, please beware. Okay, so talking about the revenue strategy, we talked a little bit, I touched on that at the beginning. So it's really, really important that you fully understand what the revenue strategy for the year is and which of that whole overall approved budget, how much of it is unrestricted, general operating support or expenses versus the restricted ones. And so I was doing some research, and the good news is that there has been an increase in trust-based philanthropy, whereas there's been an increase in foundation grants to fund unrestricted, which is like no strings attached in the sense that they trust the organization to do what's best with the funding, or for general operating support, just based on your overall programming and your overall, they trust that you'll put it to where it's most needed. So there has been an increase to 40% with foundation grants. And locally, we've heard the great news from the Barancik Foundation, which is by invite only, but they are moving towards that. Gulf Coast Community Foundation also has capacity building grants. But the most important thing for you as a grant writer to know is that it signals funder trust. It usually starts, they first have fun, you have to have a relationship, and they first may have funded a restricted project or program first as you begin to build that trust. And as you report back to them, don't let those reports slide. As you engage them, you steward them, you make sure that you're keeping them informed of lessons learned, of that you achieve what you set out to achieve in the first grant and things like that. And then really important, really important, really important, I can't stress it enough, your clean financials and measured impact. Again, we've talked about these things, so making sure that you have your financials in place, if there's any type of findings, being able to explain and say how they were addressed, and then the measured impact, together with being able to say, this was our output, this is what we did, being able to say how that translated into impact. So being able to identify what funders in your grant schedule can address those needs, look first to your top five funders, donors. It could be a major donor. Maybe it's not an institutional funder. Start to think about that, where you have those strong relationships so that you can move those grant writing strategies for the unrestricted. For the restricted one, as we described earlier, you're going to have a case for support, a specific budget, and the restricted are going to cover your programs, any capital needs, matching or challenge grants, always nice too, and capacity building. So a lot of the capacity building is going to come from the Selby Foundation, some from the Community Foundation of Sarasota County. I'm sorry, Capital is Selby Foundation, Capacity Building Community Foundation of Sarasota County, Gulf Coast Community Foundation, Manatee Community Foundation has for programs and for several different types of sectors. So you just want to truly know who your funders are so you can start separating what you're going to go after for unrestricted and what you're going to go after for restricted. And then your framework is going to be based on your net revenue goal. That's why it's so important for you, for your organization to have that approved budget at the very beginning of your fiscal year so that you know how much you're going for with your grant writing schedule. So your grant writing schedule isn't going to account for your full net revenue goal. That's why it's so important to have your fundraising plan. Your organization is probably going to have some type of special event, a ticketed event. It's going to have your annual fund where you're doing direct asks throughout the year, monthly giving, different campaigns for unrestricted giving, and year-end campaigns. And when we have the giving challenge every 2 years, that's going to be part of your fundraising plan. But it's really important for you to know then, out of all of that, how much can I truly secure through grant writing? And how much of our revenue goal, net revenue goal, is that going to account for? So that's having everything that we've already discussed ahead of time is going to help you with this framework to be able to focus and truly hone in on what's most needed. Your framework definitely is going to depend on those essential documents, essential registrations, making sure all that is in place. It takes away the stress from then focusing on the net revenue goal and how to create that grant schedule that we'll talk about in a minute.
Hey, Leeann, we have about 10, 15 minutes before
Okay,
Q&A. Yeah.
okay. Um, making sure you have your past grant history. So however you've tracked that, make sure you have that upfront because that's going to help you figure out which ones are more appropriate for unrestricted and which grants are more appropriate for restricted, and which could be a combination. And then your framework is putting together that grant schedule. So to be able to put together your grant schedule, you're gonna have to have some tools in place. So your grant opportunity finder, there are a lot of great free stuff out there. So you can subscribe to listservs, you can subscribe to some of the free platforms, and definitely the local newsletters Just how you found out about this session today, please sign up for the Manatee Community Foundation newsletter. They share some wonderful information about their grant cycles and other opportunities out there in the community. Manatee Connects is all about that, making sure that you're connected to what's happening and what's available and how you can connect with others. And all of the other local community foundations have newsletters that are going to let you know about their grant cycles. So please subscribe to those. Free platforms are out there also for you to sign up to. First that comes to mind, Philanthropy News Digest, that's completely free. You can actually create Google alerts for specific themes and funding opportunities. The thing about the Google alerts is they're pretty much national. So you know, if you're looking to step your feet into the national funding, you can do so. It will pop up the local ones, but you'll have to sift through a lot. So just be aware of that. If you do set up a Google alert, you're going to get a lot of information versus signing up for the local newsletters that are very relevant to your region and the platforms where you can put some very specific keywords. One of the platforms that you can use that's free if you go in person to Jacaranda down in Venice Public Library or the Selby Public Library is the Foundation's online directory. So that is funded through the Community Foundation of Sarasota County. They pay for it so that the public can go and have access to that platform. And there you're able to search also for funding opportunities. And it's free of cost, but you do have to drive there, be there in person, and do the work yourself in person. And then you should always have a grant tracker, be it a CRM, a database that you have in place, whatever your system, whatever your organization uses, or an Excel spreadsheet, a system that you're able to track what you've applied for and what year, for what, for how much. Was it granted? Was it not granted? If it was granted, reporting dates. If there was any match that you were committed to accomplish, if the match was committed, all of that information, you should be tracking it. That's what's going to inform your grant schedule for this fiscal year and upcoming years. So as a wrap up, and then we'll get to more Q&A, we've been able to discuss your essential documents, registration and policies, your revenue, unrestricted general and restricted, your framework. What's going to give you organizational sustainability is making sure you have that SOP, that framework in place that you repeat and rinse, and having tools that will give you your organizational competitiveness. So if you have your spreadsheets, your tracker, the tools that you can go to, even if you don't subscribe to anything, which I highly recommend you do, if you make it a point to go to and do your research on granting opportunities once a quarter, so that's 4 times a year, you have a system in place to be able to track everything and update your grant schedule as needed. So with that, I want to thank you and I want to take questions if there are any.
Leanne, Lauren Carpenter with Beyond the Spectrum had to jump off the call, but she said thank you, and it's been wonderful information and helpful, appreciative of your time and insights.
Thank you.
Um, Anybody have any questions? I told Veronica that this year with Manatee Connects, I didn't want people to leave feeling overwhelmed from a session, and I hope that you don't feel overwhelmed. I hope that you take, 2 or 3 things that over the summer that you're going to look into or work on. Um, you may want to take, if you have a little bit of more downtime, a trip to the library to look at that database that Leanne mentioned. There is a question, what were the 3 main financial documents?
Yes, so those are your 2 most recent financials. So if you are an organization, depending on the revenue that you have in the year, you might need either an audited financial statement. And if That's the threshold is 750,000 and above to have an audited financial statement. If you're below that threshold, you just need someone to have reviewed your financials. So those are the documents that you need for your two most previous fiscal years. So we're in 2026. So for fiscal year 2025, you should have either your statement, your financial statements for 2025 and your statements for 2024, be it audited or not audited. That just depends on your threshold. And in addition to that, always have your most updated quarterly statement of activities, or P&L, however you describe them in your organization. And that's just showing for each quarter where you're at against your approved budget for this fiscal year. And then that shows your funders, your progress. Did I answer your question?
There's one more that I added on there, which is a 990 if you file it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, sorry. Yeah. So you should always have your 990s, and that should also be for the two most previous fiscal years. So 2025 and 2024. And it's really important to have those. I have a client that we put together all these great applications. And in one particular month, we missed out on all those applications because the organization hadn't completed and hadn't provided to the development office those financial documents. So that was a good $200,000 worth of requests of grant applications that we couldn't submit because we didn't have those particular documents.
Thank you, Lindsay, for sharing that you are seeing some gaps where you might need to get your documents together. We always kept ours on a shared file, and the person that was in charge of writing grants, or actually that was me, and the marketing director, and I sort of updated it throughout the year. Really helpful, especially here locally, is tracking the foundation changes that Leeann
Mhm.
mentioned. So a lot of them have changed their grant cycles. I know Gulf Coast was rolling every 2 weeks, and now they've gone to quarterly, I believe. And so, knowing the timing of when these things are due is really critical. And in an ideal, perfect world, which we know doesn't exist, your fundraising plan, your strategic plan, your marketing plan would all talk to each other throughout the year.
Mhm.
And I always found it really beneficial to organize that over the summer. Of course, my fiscal year was usually July 1, June 30, so that when, October, November hit and it's season and you just can barely catch your breath, you're sort of on autopilot with all of those things.
Mhm.
Um, if you are an organization that is receiving more than 50% of your money from grants, I would strongly advise you to look at your funding diversity over the next
Yeah.
year or so, and you go back to your donors. 70% of major gifts in the country are from individuals.
Yeah.
And we know that Florida is notoriously low compared to other states in charitable giving from corporations. So I often say, unless you have an already established, sorry, I have another meeting overlapping on Teams, and that's my message is blowing up. Um, unless you already have an established relationship with a corporation, or really a shoe in, I would advise you not to waste your time there in their grants. Even Publix is hard to get. And so it's a better bang for your buck to invest in your donors, in your
Mhm.
people that support you. Grants, yes, but making sure that you've got the individuals on your side that are supporting your organization and talking to them about their legacy giving. And are
Yeah.
you in their will? And these are conversations that savvy donors are used to, and will not be offensive. And there's a way to broach that. It's not meeting one, but when you have an established relationship with a donor. And research shows that donors you have to pop up on their radar at least 7 times a year. So if you think about that, that's every other month-ish. And I know, people say to me, well, don't you worry about donor fatigue, or they're annoyed by you or unsubscribe. They might, but there's so much competitive noise in this space that you've got to stay top of mind for them. And even if it's just, and I think donors love impact stories. Um,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter how many kids you served. It's what difference did you make and how did it change their life or that family's life or that puppy or kitten's life. That's really what you want to capture for your donors and your grant applications.
Yeah. And to add to what Cameron was saying, so that's when I mentioned earlier on that I'm hoping that none of your organizations are relying solely on grants. It's specifically because of what Cameron just said. So year after year, the Giving USA report has showed pretty consistently that 70 to almost 75% comes from individual donors. That includes bequests, so the legacy giving that Cameron just mentioned. But also 19% is coming from foundations. So if you extrapolate that and you look at your overall budget, your revenue income streams, outside of if you have program revenue, so some organizations charge fees for certain programs and you get some of your income there. But if you're just looking solely at an organization that doesn't receive program revenue, you shouldn't be banking that you're going to get over 50% of your revenue from grants when history has shown that grants are basically 15 to 19% nationally of what you'll get for your revenue. So that's really important to choose the right ones. And thank you for saying it that way, Cameron, because I did want to say, once you do have your grant schedule, it's really easy to be hearing from everybody across the across the board. Oh, you should be going after that, and then you keep adding on and adding on. If you did your research, if you checked your historic grant history, if you checked who your funders are, and you said, okay, these are the ones I feel good about. I'm going to talk with my funder. It could be through a DAF, whatever it is. These are the ones we want to go after for the restricted. These are the ones that we feel highly aligned with. Either we have a relationship already. These are the ones we're going to go after. Every time somebody suggests something to you, you're in a position just like that gift acceptance policy to say, thank you so much. This sounds like a great opportunity. We already have what we're going to do, that really are well aligned. And if it's a good opportunity, of course, if it's somebody who's saying, dropped out of the sky and said, I'm going to give you $500,000 just because, all right. But if it's like these little $2,000 ones, $5,000, TD Bank or Bank of America, as Cameron said, stay true to your grant schedule if you truly did the homework, because it's so easy to get wrapped up and have everybody telling you what you should be applying for. And if it makes sense, adjust your grant schedule. If it doesn't make sense, you already have something that's going to give you a bigger bang for your buck with less work. I have one client, or one colleague, I should say, not a client, one colleague who did a lot of work with one of the financial institutions. And the conversation started up here that they were going to give that colleague this much. And at the end of the day, the colleague told me, I will never, ever go after that money again. Too much work. It ended up being something that I could have gotten out of a major donor in a conversation over coffee versus going through all those hoops, having all these meetings, blah, 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 blah. So just, discern, I guess, is the message I'm trying to get across right now. Just make
Yeah, and
sure you're
sometimes those
discerning.
large gift grants, and I know Bransic will do this, multi-year grants, but then when that grant comes to an end after year two or three, how are you sustaining it? And they will
Hmm.
ask you that in the application.
Hmm.
So you already have to start thinking about a plan for sustainability.
Yeah.
And it's painful if you hire up for a grant because you have 150,000, now you need a staff person. The last thing you want to do is let that staff person go
Yeah.
at the end of that grant period. So then leadership, it's incumbent upon leadership and the board to talk about how that we're going to sustain that program even after the funds go away. So that's
Yeah.
just something else to think about. Some of these grants are really bright and shiny until you get into the nitty gritty. And like Leanne said, they're either too much to manage or we haven't thought about sustainability. And it's really unrealistic for our organization to accept that kind of
Yeah.
money.
And that's why it's so important to stay true to the organizational approved budget.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
don't, you're not going to create something just because the money is out there. How does that, how does that fit your strategic goal? Unless it's something that your board and your leadership has said, this is the direction we're going, you shouldn't be chasing a grant because it gives you $150,000 and creates a new position. But where was that with your strategic goal? Has the board approved that? Is that direction the organization was heading, regardless if that funding opportunity was there or not? So those are things that, as staff, we don't make all decisions, but we should be asking those questions.
Anything else? Chianti, thank you. I'm just going to read your comment. She said it's amazing and insightful information that she's never heard before. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing this. Somebody,
Thank you all. Have a wonderful week.
okay, take care, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye bye.